Hello and welcome to Behind the Scenes, a podcast where we talk about the intersection of art, culture, and big ideas. I'm your host, Sean Malone, the creative director for the Foundation for Economic Education and creator of the Out of Frame YouTube series, which is associated with this podcast. Here today, not in studio, because at least I don't know if Jen is traveling as well, but we're all going to be traveling very, very soon and did not have time to make it into the studio. So, but we wanted to do an episode today on Black Widow. So I'm here with Jen Mafsanti and Paul Nelson as usual, as you can see on your screens. But we're going to be talking about Black Widow in a little bit. But maybe before we get into that, we can talk about a few other things that are going on here. It's I don't know for those who weren't aware of it, but it's FEE's 75th anniversary this year. Paul and I, and formerly Jen, get to sort of oversee this great kind of milestone in FEE's history, and I'm pretty excited about it. But one cool thing that I get to do here in a bit is go to South Dakota for a big conference, and we get to have a big party for our 75th anniversary. So I'm headed out to South Dakota tomorrow. Jen, are you coming to South Dakota, or is it just Connor?
It's just Connor, who is my boss, by the way. For those of you who are unaware, Connor Boyack is the president of Libertas Institute, and he will be attending Freedom Fest, but I will not, unfortunately.
Yeah, cool. I'm looking forward to it. This is an event that I have ended up speaking at for a lot of years, and they have a film festival that's attached to it, and I judge all the films. So I am now like 30 maybe films to my judging. I have one left. I have one feature documentary left, and I'm pretty excited about it because it's called The Mighty Ira, and it's about a Ira Glasser, I think that's his name, who used to be the president of the ACLU, and I'm pretty excited about watching that. But that's the only one we've got left. Last night we watched a really good free to choose documentary. It's kind of a PBS documentary about Thomas Sowell, which was really nice, and that was pretty great. And we also, prior to that, just watched a Shelby Steele documentary about the Ferguson, Missouri shooting, Michael Brown shooting. Very, very interesting all the way around. There have been some misses, like judging film festivals is not always the best, but you don't always get, perfect stuff. But these last couple have been really good, and it's been kind of enjoyable. So we're ending on a high note, hopefully. And I've got high hopes for this last one that we have left to do tonight. But man, I don't know. How are you guys doing? Paul, how's it going?
Well, while you have been watching mind-expanding content that has brought you new meaning to this thing we call life, I have been just neck deep in the latest season of Love Island UK. It's back after a year hiatus. The COVID couldn't kill it, and now we're back, and it's just great. It's like an old glove. Is that the saying? It just fits.
I don't know if that feels wrong for this, but
or right.
Unclear.
It depends on who you ask. That's
who knows.
So the love triangles are back. The language of, even though they're speaking English, it's a very different English than American English. So it takes you about 4 or 5 episodes to really get your ear tuned to British English. And it's fun. It's just a lot of fun. It's mindless entertainment that you just kind of sit back and say, wow, these people are doing this for $50,000 if you win. And that's actually usually split halfway with the couple. So Wow. It's not like this is life-changing money, but it's something. And I'm sure you've seen the Love Island US stuff. Don't waste your time. It's knockoff trash. Usually the United States is better at everything than the UK, but not in this particular arena.
Sometimes TV, it's kind of hit or miss though. British TV is so specific. Like I like the American version of The Office better than the British version, actually, because it's toned down a little bit. Because like Ricky Gervais, the David Brent character is so hard to watch and hard to take, and like the Michael Scott version, like he's actually a little bit redeemable. Like he's not a horrible person in the same way. So stuff like that, I feel like gets a little bit better. But yeah, I don't know how some reality shows. Also, American Shark Tank, dramatically better and more interesting than Dragon's Den, which is the British and I believe the original version. But Dragon's Den's like they like really missed the boat on like actually caring about the entrepreneurs. Like they don't really take any time like to do any of the entrepreneurial journeys or the stories of any of the people. And yeah, I don't know, it's a lot more boring comparatively. So yeah. Glad to hear Love Island is doing it for you, though.
It's great. And the Max, I don't know how much I want to get into this on this podcast. Maybe we could talk about it in the Discord, but they have a particular show coming out that is right up my alley, and I sent Jen and Sean the trailer.
It's not appropriate. It's not appropriate for this podcast.
The Max is killing
it, though. This is a family-friendly podcast. We can't talk about this show right now.
Yes, this will not be I mean, I'm assuming it won't be a family-friendly show, but I don't really think Love Island is a family-friendly show. I would not expose children to such television. Even if it were like technically okay, I wouldn't expose them to it. I think it would ruin them in a lot of ways. Oh man, I don't know. But I don't know, Jen, how are you doing? What are you watching? What are you paying attention to right now?
Oh man, I have been so deep into anime these days. So thanks, fans. Thanks, viewers. I appreciate you for getting me back into anime.
I should say I made Jen help me with the so by the time this airs, like the Out of Frame short on Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood will be out, and like I watched the whole show, but like and I enjoyed it, but I wanted to do it as a short, and so I roped Jen into helping me with it and made Jen watch the show too. So we yeah, are you continuing on some other anime series?
Yeah, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood was shockingly good. Like I really, really enjoyed it. It was an entertaining show. And then I was like, you know what? I used to watch a lot of anime when I was in high school. Let's go revisit some of the old stuff that I liked before. And so like my kids are really, really feeling like all of the Gundam series right now. Like it's just giant robots wall to wall at my house. It's great.
Yeah. Well, I said, so Jen, I don't even think you've read my rewrites on this episode, although you probably, I don't know. Anyway, you'll see them in a second in any case. But the one of the things I said too was that like I actually want to continue and revisit some of the old stuff, but also like look at some of the new things that people told me to watch, like that weren't Full Metal Alchemist. Like when I did the poll on the YouTube community, I got a lot of responses from it, and a lot of people had a lot of suggestions. And Full Metal Alchemist, this kind of a spoiler for the Out of Frame short episode, but like it was a little hard to find a way to connect Full Metal Alchemist to what we usually talk about on Out of Frame. And so doing an episode of Out of Frame on Full Metal Alchemist like wasn't perfect for me, at least from my vantage point. Just because a lot of the show is really about religion more than, and it's sort of about the nature of reality and what it means to be a human and things like that, which is not really what we talk about on Out of Frame. So that was a little weird, but I do actually want to go in and check out some of the other shows that people have told us to watch, like Death Note and I don't know. I don't know if I'm saying this right. Code Geass. I think I'm saying it correctly, but I really don't know. Anyway, I want to check out some more of that kind of stuff, and who knows, maybe that'll find its way into new Out of Frame episodes. I'm not sure. But yeah, I mean, even going back to some of the older stuff that I have liked in the past, like Cowboy Bebop, which I put on the list, and that was pretty high up there. There's definitely stuff to talk about in Cowboy Bebop that I would be interested
I love
in.
that show.
It's great, and I because I care more about music in general. Yoko Kanno is a phenomenal composer,
So good.
and all the music in that show is amazing. So I'm a pretty big fan of that. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think like sometimes, and this has been one of the interesting things about doing the podcast for me too, is that it's kind of forced the three of us to go out of our way to watch things that maybe we wouldn't have watched otherwise, which I've kind of enjoyed, because there are things, you know, we bring up Fat Man a lot. Fat Man is probably something that, like, without the show, I may or may not have watched, but like, I'm glad I did. I mean, there's a lot of things like that I kind of feel like, or I feel like I got you guys to watch Love and Monsters, and you guys, you know, probably wouldn't have watched that otherwise.
Great
but
film.
yeah, so I don't know. Well, maybe I'll find some more things to like about anime as we go through this. And Jen, as you are going through your, you know, rewatching of anime, let me know if there's anything that you want to do an episode on, because I think there could be cool
Absolutely.
stuff. But yeah. Oh man, yeah, I really haven't been doing anything outside of just judging this film festival. So hopefully, like, in about a week, I'll be able to like chill out a little bit and watch something else that's not entirely true. I've been rewatching Mythic Quest because I'm doing an Out of Frame feature episode on Mythic Quest, which is kind of a teaser for everybody, I suppose. But yeah, anyway, let's get into this Black Widow situation, because this is I don't know. I mean, it's funny because like we're you know, a week out of Black Widow's release, you know, when we're recording this. Is that right? Yeah, it's been out a week or week and a half,
Yep.
roughly. And I don't hear a lot of people talking about it right now, which is intriguing to me. It did make a decent amount of money for, you know, in a sort of like with an asterisk, right? Like, it's a decent amount of money in sort of weak box office times, but, you know, not anything near what it would have made, you know, a few years ago for sure. But I don't know, guys. Let's get into it. I guess, you know, Paul, why don't I just start, like, why don't you give us a little synopsis of the basic story? I think most people are probably fairly familiar with it, but then we'll dig into this Black Widow.
So Black Widow, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not a huge Marvel's MCU fan. So this movie takes place in between Civil War and Avengers Endgame, correct?
Yeah, Infinity War and all that. Yeah.
Infinity War,
Yeah.
sorry. And so this story follows, gives us a little bit of taste of Black Widow, Natasha's, Scarlett Johansson's character, her upbringing as a Russian plant in Ohio, which that's like the worst existence known to man, Russian in Ohio. But so she made it out of that trial and was basically abducted and turned into what we know, what we were introduced to at the beginning of the Avengers series as the Black Widow. So this movie takes us through her coming out of Civil War, being chased down by the American government, and she happens across this note from her long lost sister, which leads her to Budapest, and they fight, but then they come together and they realize that people that she thought she killed to get into the Avengers are not actually dead. So now they have to go back and finish the job. Yeah. And David Harbour was in this movie.
Yeah. But there are many things about this movie. There are some things that I like about this movie. but I can't help but feeling like in general it was kind of disappointing. And there's a handful of reasons for me why it was kind of disappointing. One, it like taking place when it does, like in like the very first question you have to ask really is just why didn't this movie come out in 2017? Because it should have just taken place chronologically between, like, if you were going to do this movie, just do it after Civil War and make it a whole thing. Plus, if you'd done it at that time, like if the MCU had done it at that time, they could have brought in more characters that they can't really bring in now. Like you could have had, more people that were associated with the MCU around that time, possibly including Captain America, but certainly probably including Clint Barton, Jeremy Renner's character, probably including, and I'm not saying you had to do any of that, but like even something like Martin Freeman's like Global Security Council character, like you could have included in this, and they didn't. And again, I'm not saying that you had to include these characters. It's just it doesn't feel very well integrated, and it feels too late as a result. So like it's a movie that like doesn't really have anything to do with anything else, which they kind of had to do as a result of the fact that we know where her character ends up. So they can't like alter anything or really radically change any of the events of Infinity War, Endgame, or Thor Ragnarok, or any of the other movies that have come out, between Civil War and now. And then it didn't really give Scarlett Johansson, for me anyway, it didn't really give Scarlett Johansson enough to make me feel like this was a good send-off as a movie. I don't hate it. Like it's not the worst movie I've ever seen. It's certainly, I don't know. It's not the worst of the MCU movies, but it's not really in the top half for me. Probably in the bottom quarter, if it's me. So I don't know. I'd love to get your guys' thoughts. We like, just so the audience listeners know, like we haven't really had a chance to fully dive into this or really talk about it too much, but I can get into specifics in a bit. But Jen, what were your like sort of initial reactions?
I fully agree with you that this should have come out chronologically between Civil War and Infinity War. That was a missed opportunity. And more than that, it's missing the first movie in the Black Widow saga. We should have had a movie right after Iron Man 2 was released that was Natasha's story of escaping the Red Room, so that we had a full understanding of why bringing this organization down was so important to Natasha. That was critically missing from this film. It was just a thing that they have to do because they gotta.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Red Room real quick, because like in Age of Ultron, Natasha tells this story a little bit. So this is the only thing like we really had to set this up, was she told Bruce Banner the story about growing up in the Red Room. And I mean, there's a lot of press, which I always thought was stupid. Like it was perfectly legitimate for her to feel bad about having forced sterilization and all that kind of stuff. Just seems, although they play it for a laugh in this movie, which seems like an odd choice to me. But anyway, like she grew up in this training, the horrific sort of training environment where she was being brainwashed essentially to be an assassin. And so she talks about that, and then she talks about the fact that she has killed a whole bunch of people, on behalf of the Russian government or the former KGB, or whatever. In this case, this guy's name is Dreykov. I'm not really sure what his goals are other than just world domination. We should definitely talk about the villain in this movie because he's incredibly weak. But regardless, like she was, brutalized by this entity. And so, yeah, this movie like basically tells us and gives us a little bit of a flashback that she's, part of her like escape from all of that was to actually destroy Dreykov and the Red Room and all that stuff. Now, so we should say, like, we're probably going to get into like none of what we said so far, I feel like qualifies as a legitimate spoiler. This is all like trailer kind of stuff. But we are going to get into spoilers as we go through this. But I don't know. I mean, it just feels like something was kind of missing. And again, I also kind of feel like Clint Barton's missing. Like, I feel like it's a little weird that they have this such a personal relationship, and we've never gotten to see it in action. Like, we've only ever seen it in the periphery of other movies where they talk about their history. They talk about, even in this movie, they go to Budapest, right? And they go to the safe house and have a totally unnecessary fight with like Scarlett Johansson has this totally unnecessary fight with her fake sister or whatever. And then they point out to some burn marks on the wall, and she's like, "Oh, that's arrows." And we're like, "Oh, Hawkeye was part of this thing." And of course he was, right? But he's not involved in this, which just seems so strange to me. I mean, I get that, like, chronologically he's like in prison at this state, right? Like, I think he's on the raft, like in jail. But still, like, I don't know. I don't quite get that aspect of it. It just feels like a departure, and that doesn't really seem like what you would have wanted to do when it's your last movie with this major character who ended up being sacrificed, in Endgame, or I guess at the end of Infinity War. So no, it was in Endgame. What am I talking about? Yeah, I don't know. Paul, what are your like sort of main thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I agree with both of you. This is definitely not Marvel at its best. This is probably one of the lower, probably in the bottom quarter of Marvel movies. That still being said, that's a pretty high bar. So it's still entertaining. But for me, what really is interesting to me, the choices that they made, is that the morality of the movie is pretty questionable. And the only reason why I even bring it up is because the morality in the Disney Plus shows have been questionable. So it's and I don't know if this is the road they're going down after Captain America era and Iron Man era superheroes, where morality is kind of all over the place and whatever we decide. But we can talk about that when we talk about the villains. But this feels to me that they had Scarlett Johansson with one more movie that she could do in her contract, and they're like, we're going to do it. So let's figure out a way to tie this into something we're going to be making in the future. And so Florence Pugh, Elena, is Scarlett Johansson's little sister in this. It's basically her movie, but they don't lean into that fully. And I think that's where they lose it. And I think if they were like, if they just said, this is Elena's movie, and Scarlett, we're going to use Black Widow as the draw, but in reality, this is about her. I think it could have been a success because this is really her origin story. And I think, but this kind of plays off. Then this is the first Marvel movie that I really feel like this. But we've talked about this on previous episodes about really Netflix doing this poorly. But this, then calling movies content, this felt like hashtag content. And we'll probably get into this later. But the end post credit scene, it really hit home to me that this was just a 2-hour advertisement for Disney Plus, and there really wasn't much more to it than that, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I generally agree. I think you're right. It is Florence Pugh's movie, or it should be. In a lot of ways, it should be. It's definitely her origin story. It's although there are aspects of that too that kind of bother me, because like the whole essence of what happened here was that, like, Black Widow, Natasha Romanoff went through this brainwashing, this like torturous, sort of programming to become this assassin. And now, the guy who, theoretically she was in this environment with like 20 other people, it's a very small number of people, which is how you end up with somebody who can be a superhero caliber level skilled person, like, who doesn't have any actual powers, right? Like, Black Widow doesn't have any superpowers. So her existence is built on the fact that she is uniquely talented, uniquely skilled. Well, this movie kind of kicked kind of kicks that in the face in a lot of ways, because now there's hundreds of women who are around the world who are presumably equally skilled. Now, granted, the ones in this movie are more technologically brainwashed, which means that they can be broken of their brainwashing. But that doesn't actually help my point at all, because if they're all broken, but they still have all the physical skills that Black Widow has, now you legitimately have a world of hundreds of people who can basically do what Natasha Romanoff does and who are not being mind controlled. So, presumably you could draw on that pool to, bring in new Black Widows for the Avengers or for other teams or whatever you want to do. Of course, it's probably going to be Florence Pugh. And then, of course, like the post credits. So this is the big spoiler, really. The post credits is like leaning into the Hawkeye series that they've already announced and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, Paul, I agree. I mean, I feel like it's a lot of a promo for Disney Plus, which Scarlett Johansson's not even going to be in. So, who knows? I mean, maybe she'll make a cameo in the Hawkeye thing, but I doubt it, because I'm pretty sure the Hawkeye series takes place in the future from where we are in the current MCU. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so it's frustrating because you see sparks, you see good things in here. I think the scenes where the family is sitting around, well, the family is, quote unquote, the family is sitting around a dinner table and they're just hitting one-liners off each other. That's great. They had great chemistry, but then the action sequences were some of the worst I've seen in any movie in a long time, and it's just basically CGI. Has really nothing to do with the actors, which is unfortunate. There was one where they're getting chased by the Taskmaster in Budapest, and they go from a motorcycle. They were on a motorcycle for 15 seconds, and then you could tell they needed the actors back on set, so that crashed, and they got in a car and they green screen drove away. So it was that level of just pretty bad. And that's just unfortunate because you had a great cast, and they're just talented actors. And it's just unfortunate that it's wrong time, wrong story. I mean, ideally for me, this would have been, I would have loved to seen a Black Widow, Mission Impossible style movie where it's just this high tech stuff, which we kind of get a taste of, but high tech stuff enough.
And they sort of rehash some of the technology we've already seen, like the digital face mask thing and all that kind of stuff, like we've seen in several movies. I mean, that was in Captain America's Civil War, but I mean, it's like a lot of the beats, because they do like recall a few things, right? Like they recall, Natasha's saying thank you for your cooperation, and like kind of playing this. She doesn't play the ingenue in the same way that she did in either Avengers or in like Iron Man 2, for example. But like they're drawing on some of those same kinds of things that they had in the, in previous movies. And that's all fine. Like callbacks are fine to me, but like it felt kind of phoned in as a result. And there wasn't a lot new. There wasn't like a big Mission Impossible or James Bondy kind of quality to it. And by the way, as far as the action scenes are concerned, my big complaint really is that Black Widow apparently cannot be hurt, like in any meaningful way. She is blown up. She's flipped over multiple times in multiple automobiles throughout a 3-day period. Basically, this movie does not take place over a long period of time. She doesn't inject anything to heal herself up. She doesn't have a rest. She doesn't get her arm in a sling. Like there's literally nothing that changes her health status, but she is able to take motorcycle crash and flipping cars and helicopter crashes and you name it. Not to mention the third act of her jumping out of basically a flying fortress without a parachute, being chased. I mean, just everything about that. I mean,
after getting beaten badly.
after getting beaten, well, theoretically beaten badly, right? But she didn't take any damage from being beaten up. But this is a huge spoiler, but she didn't take any damage from being beaten up either by Dreykov or by the like 60 girls that show up that are like the brainwashed Black Widow crew. You know, I mean, she didn't take any damage at all. You know, the most damage she takes is like her own breaking of the nose, but then the minute she resets it, she seems to be fine. So it's stuff like that just makes it really hard to take the characterization seriously, because you're like, this is not. And even in stuff like Age of Ultron, she gets tired. She gets worn out. She's at the end of that battle, she's kind of haggard, and she's like, I don't, you know, like you can sense this, like, I don't have that much left. Right. And yeah, I mean, you don't get that in this movie. She's got an infinite tank and unbreakable bones somehow. So, which I don't understand why you do that when you don't, like, this is a character that you does not have superpowers. So let's lean into the fact that this is a human, like an ultra skilled human woman who has to deal in, you know, in being smarter than her opponents and being, you know, more tactically sound than her opponents. Like, you would think that that would be the way that you approach it, but no, this is like she's Thor and she can crash through a, you know, she can fall thousands of feet in the air and it's fine. You know, I don't know. I don't get that aspect of this movie, and it does really take you out of it at some point, because it's not really. I mean, again, you can kind of accept that Thor or Hulk or somebody like that can take these kinds of beatings, but I don't know why I would expect one of our two fully human Avengers to be able to take that kind of damage. And if Hawkeye took that kind of damage, if like we end up with that kind of damage to Hawkeye in the Hawkeye series, it's going to be insane. You know, like I don't know. I guess 3, because you know, Falcon is not really superpowered either, but
yeah, they don't need it. And I think what's so disappointing, they don't need to do it. She, like, Scarlett Johansson is talented enough to pull off a action movie by herself. She doesn't need to have CGI to fling her this way and that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. But that would presume that we were going to do a movie that was more like the Mission Impossible kind of stuff, which is the more interesting. I mean, that's what the character is, right? So that would be more interesting to me to begin with. But I don't know, Jen. Sort of like, I want to get into the morality aspect of this in a second, but like, do you have any things to sort of wrap up on the general review?
Yes, this is going to go back to the plot armor that Black Widow seems to have. She just doesn't take damage. She can take hit after hit and she's fine. Throw on top of all of that they reveal right after the girls rescue their dad from prison, that all of the widows have been given radical hysterectomies in probably their early adulthood.
And
this
it's funny
means that they are, and it's funny, apparently. This means that they are functionally postmenopausal. None of their bones are going to stand up to that, okay? Like,
yeah,
there's a reason that women have these hormones and they have this biology. It helps keep, I don't know, us functional. It like it's really important to a lot of different systems in your body, and you just rip those out in like someone's, I don't know, late teens, early 20s. No, they're gonna be like shriveled old women by the time they're 30.
People are really cavalier about like modifying people's hormones and stuff as if it has no other effect than some like very narrow, like, oh well, you can't have kids anymore. Yeah, it's going to be more than that. But you just reminded me also that I was so sad with David Harbour. So David Harbour, at the beginning of the movie, I really, really like his character. He plays a character named Alexei. I forget his last name, but he ultimately is Red Guardian, which is sort of the USSR's version of Captain America. I mean, that's sort of the idea. Although I got to say also, because of the timing of this and because of Scarlett Johansson's age and the MCU's just timing in general, they couldn't use the USSR as a villain here because it had to be set, like their childhood had to be set in the 90s. So like that didn't really work, but whatever, who cares? But anyway, David Harbour, I feel so bad about because the whole movie, Red Guardian, is kind of he's a little bit of a joke. Like he is genuinely kind of awesome at the beginning of the movie, and they're this sleeper. It's basically the Americans at the beginning of the movie. They're a family of sleeper agents from Russia that, anyway, they escape the United States, and then the minute they land in Cuba, pretty much David Harbour, like the girls are sent away to this brainwashing, red room place, and then David Harbour, we assume, goes off to be like a hero of the, of Glasnost or whatever the hell it is at this point. But the problem is, then we find out later that he was basically arrested and sent to prison for years and years and years afterwards. They break him out of prison, and then we learn pretty much instantly that he could have broken out of prison himself pretty much any time. He really didn't need their help, but he didn't have anything to do, and he was bored. And so he was, telling stories and doing arm wrestling matches and stuff. But he, over the course of the movie, he has a lot of really good moments. And I think Paul was kind of alluding to this. There's a lot of really good moments with him and Florence Pugh, for example, where they're sitting. He was their father figure, like regardless of whether or not that was fake, like he was their father figure when they were really little. And he was a bad one because he let them go off and be abused and everything else. And so even though it's not really his responsibility in a lot of ways, like he feels responsible for it and he eventually sort of atones for it. And you would think that this would be sort of capped off by Red Guardian getting to be heroic and awesome at the end of the movie, except for he's a bumbling idiot once he puts his old suit back on and it barely fits. It's too tight and his gut's sticking out. And that's all played for laughs and it's funny and great. But then you think that like after making amends with all of the relationships that he had and sort of reclaiming his status as father figure, he would actually have something awesome to do at the end of the movie. And then he just gets like beaten up by Taskmaster super easily, which is lame, like really lame. He's also the only superpowered person in this movie. He is their tank and he doesn't act like a tank at all. So I don't really get that, and I feel really badly for that character because it just feels like they really wasted opportunities there. But let's talk about the morality. Paul, what do you want to say about that? Like, let's get into it.
Yeah, so you can't watch this movie and not come away that they were trying to talk about the state of Hollywood with like Harvey Weinstein and things like that. So the big villain is basically Harvey Weinstein. I don't know. It pretty much nails it right on the nose. It's a pretty straightforward. And he is controlling women around the world. And the greatest commodity, untapped commodity left on this planet is little girls.
Which line makes no sense at all, but sure, why not?
It was weird. So like all that, he's a bad guy, obviously. But I think where the morality part, where it's questionable, is Natasha and Elena's mother, well, quote unquote mother. She is basically the one that enabled all of this.
Yep.
And she led the Red Room back to them, almost got everyone killed. But then at the last minute, she had a change of heart and as a tone.
We don't even really get to see her change of heart, by the way.
No.
Like they don't even do that on screen, which is strange.
She decades of manipulating women, torturing women, enslaving them, sending them to die, changing their chemical biology, they're just everything, and she's just let off the hook. Why? I don't know. I mean, just because I guess because the man did it. And then also you have the prison. This is lesser extent, but the prison scene. They start an avalanche to break out the Red Guardian, and presumably kill everyone in the prison.
A lot of people, anyway. More than zero, for sure. Yeah.
That's and they just on to the next joke about a hysterectomy. And the last thing I think is kind of what they were kind of grappling with in the movie, but this to me was like the least had more moral implications. I don't know why. I just didn't really care about the storyline, but was Scarlett Johansson's character killing Harvey Weinstein's daughter, or thinking she killed her when she took him out in the first attempted hit in Budapest. So that part was kind of the moral basis for the movie, but to me it was pretty, at least for as far as moral implications, it was pretty cut and dry why she did it. But that was pretty much the only person that came to terms with something immoral. But then the rest of the movie, they didn't talk
was
about.
kind of absolved of it, which is, I think a bad way to handle that in a lot of ways, because what it was the cowardly way of telling that story. Because what was, and I think this is, look, we've had a lot of, I guess now we can call it foreshadowing to some extent, but basically, like, Scarlett Johansson as Natasha Romanoff throughout the Avengers series, throughout the entire MCU, has indicated multiple times that she feels a tremendous amount of guilt for various actions in her past, right? She feels that she took a lot of innocent, I mean, again, she's not very specific about it, because why would she be? She's ashamed of all of this stuff. But this is the moment that we learn in this film probably what she's ashamed of the most, right? Is killing an innocent little girl in order to get at Dreykov. And that's like a really, really heavy thing, that if you play that for what it is, it gives good motivation and reason to all of the things that came before, where she feels like she said in Age of Ultron, she says, "You think you're the only monster here," referring to Hulk. What she was referring to for herself was these kinds of things. She was referring to being an assassin and murdering people and up to and including innocent child, basically. That's really heavy, and it's good characterization, but they deleted it, basically, because, it turns out you didn't actually kill her. So even though you thought you did, you really don't have to feel that bad about it. So it's sort of okay. Like, it kind of, like, again, it's this kind of Disney-fied, I mean, literally kind of Disney-fied version of all of this stuff, where it's like, we're going to take the teeth out of it. And I don't appreciate that, because I really think that, like, having her struggle with the immorality of her choices in the past and then have to make different choices in the future is actually better for that character. So for her to actually have killed the little girl and to have to grapple with that, and then even in making atones for it, like, she tries to go and take down the Red Room, like the new version of the Red Room, that's good, but it still does not absolve her from her previous actions. That's something that she has to live with, and it makes for a deep and interesting and complex character. But they just, like, they retroactively, like, erased that as a challenge.
So to me, it's actually worse that the little girl didn't die. Like, we're trying to take the teeth out of this. We're trying to ease that blow. But what happened to her in the intervening years, from the bombing that was supposed to have killed her to the action of the movie, that had to have been absolute hell for her. She had all of her autonomy, all of her humanity stripped away from her, and she knew it. That's worse, and that's what's getting the pass. And it's unconscionable.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and Black Widow doesn't even have to deal with that really at all. I mean, it's, I don't know, like everything. I mean, but I think, Paul, I think you're right. I mean, we see this in WandaVision. We saw this in Falcon and Winter Soldier. We saw this in Loki, although at least Loki is about villains. It's about bad guys. So, like, at least with Loki, you can't try to make the claim that, like, even if Loki was trying to do the right thing, he's not very good at it. So it's not, it's not very hard to believe that one wouldn't go well. But WandaVision, I mean, like, the unconscionable acts that we've seen in some of these shows, like that just get a pass as if like the heroism, I know, like it keeps coming back up, but that moment when Monica Rambeau tells Wanda that the people who she had just enslaved for, I don't know, months, they'll never know her sacrifice. What are you talking about? Like, she didn't sacrifice anything. She was, at best, unbeknownst to her, trying to work through her grief. But at worst, she was deliberately enslaving a town full of people. Like, that's not okay. And if that's what Marvel now thinks is heroic, like, I don't know how they're going to be able to create stories going forward that are actually superhero stories, which it's kind of their whole deal, you'd think. But I don't know, man. I mean, we've seen this in the comics. This is what worries me in general about a lot of where the MCU is headed, is that like the comics are, let's say 5 to 10 years behind or in front of, I guess I'll say, like what the MCU is doing. So the MCU is like drawing on comics that were like 4 or 5 years old at this point, or a little bit older. And all the Marvel comics for the last several years have been awful, and they have featured a lot of these same kinds of problems where the morality of what they're doing is totally subservient, and in many cases, like completely backwards to the first of all, to the political narratives that Marvel writers want to imbue in their comics, which is super obnoxious. But more importantly, to like the idea of the character. So they'll say, it's not even the idea of the character, but like it's the image of the character. So we have a hero, everything they do is heroic because they're the hero, rather than saying everything they do is heroic because they're actually acting in ways that are morally justified and, in service of protecting and aiding humanity in some kind of way. That is not what happens a lot, and what has happened in in Marvel Comics in the publishing side for the last 5+ years now, 5 to 10 years. I mean, even Captain Marvel. I mean, I talked about this in the Captain Marvel episode I did in her Civil War story arc, and her Civil War and Civil War II story arcs in the comics. She's a horrible, horrible person. She is not in any way a beacon of morality. And yet I am fairly certain that that's what they're drawing on to bring into the MCU. And that concerns me a lot, because if these things are meant to be, in any way, moral lessons that kids should take away from, heroes and villains, good guys and bad guys, and to even reduce it to that level of good and bad, like they're not getting it right now. They are not telling stories that are actually imbuing their heroes with heroism, which that feels like the only thing you should absolutely get right if you're in that business. But I don't know. I mean, but it's true, like across Hollywood. Like I feel like almost every movie I've watched in the last decade or so, like, has severe confusion along heroic versus immoral acts. Like people get it wrong all the time. And we talked about this with the I Care a Lot movie. I mean, even little indie movies get this stuff wrong constantly. So I don't know, man. It's the Phase 4 is not exactly looking up for me right now, but
yeah. No, it's definitely they've had so much success, but which they've rightly earned. They've made really great movies that have totally changed the face of Hollywood and how movies are going to be made probably for the next 10, 15 years. But we've touched on this before, particularly with Netflix, but that just because you're successful for a long stretch of time and 20 movies doesn't mean you're going to be successful indefinitely. And if you keep writing stories like this and having some pretty weird gray areas, not even legitimate gray areas, which is not even places where any place in society would say is a gray area, you're not going to end up being top dog for long. And
Yeah.
I mean, in a great world, DC would have their stuff together and would be able to give us something different. But I think
Yeah,
you have to look for, if you really want superhero content, I think you got to look elsewhere. And I think and Amazon is actually doing with two different shows, with The Boys, which is obviously a very dark uh, universe, but they morality is actually pretty strong on what they do. Like they don't sugarcoat stuff, and they
yeah.
actually talk about people with bad pasts doing something different, making
Well,
different choices.
you actually have characters like Huey on The Boys that are the beacon of morality, right? Like Huey is in the center of that, going like, this is what it should be. And if we can all get here, it's good. But like, look at all of the awfulness that's around it. I'm perfectly okay with that. You can tell a really dark, story around antiheroes. And again, we were talking about this with like the Joker. Like, you can tell the story of the Joker, but like, you can't make the Joker the good guy. Like, you can't try to present the Joker as being a good person, but you can show like, this is darkness, like this is the worst, and I don't know. I mean, DC has the same problem as Marvel in a lot of cases. I mean, I'll just take for example, Aquaman, where the guy's begging for his life and he's just like, whatever, I don't care, I'm just gonna let you drown or whatever. And it's like, well, I mean, yeah, it's understandable because like he was bad to you, and he was cheating, he was being unfair in that situation, but you're the superhero. So like, if you rise above all of that stuff. And if you don't, then like, you shouldn't really get that label. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of these studios are very, very confused right now.
Yeah. It's weird.
And then they wonder why people aren't going to the movies anymore.
Right. Oh yeah, Black Widow has had a huge drop off from their opening from the opening week,
which I expected. We talked about this last week. Paul posted what was it, like $60 million or something like that for its opening box office? $80 million, which
just in theaters.
80 million. You're right. Yeah, the actual box office take was 80 million, which is, I think would be. It's not good for a big summer tent pole, but like, I would say it's respectable, and it's respectable like in the context of like, if the movie was released in February or something like that, that could have been the box office leader for like a February release. Now, for a July release, historically, pretty bad, but especially for a Marvel release, but not bad. But I said I expected the drop off to be pretty significant, because pretty much everybody who wanted to see it in theaters and was comfortable seeing it in theaters was going to go. I mean, I did. I mean, we probably all did. I don't know if Jen, if you saw it in the theater, but everybody else who wanted to watch it right away was going to watch it on Disney Plus. But now anybody who doesn't care that much can afford to wait until it becomes available for their regular subscription price. So they know that it's going to come down, and they know that eventually, like Mulan, it's going to wind its way into Disney Plus's regular rotation. So I don't expect it to do. I mean, I'm not saying it won't do. It may break even. I'm honestly, I'm not really sure. Do you think it's at break even status already? I haven't really looked.
Let me pull it up right here. It is at 130. It's at 232 million worldwide.
Okay.
So
yeah, I doubt that it's there. Yeah, it's probably about halfway there, I would imagine.
But that also doesn't include Disney Plus premium buys, which add on what Disney said they had $60 million worth of buys on opening weekend. Okay. So that's not factored in that number.
Yeah. All right. So let's call it let's say it's 2/3 of the way there, even, potentially. But like, it could make back its money, but it's not going to be this $1 billion juggernaut, like, which some of that's not their fault, but I think some of it is. I think if we were coming on, this show, and not just, I mean, even outside of the context of doing this in a podcast or whatever, like, if we were just getting together and talking as friends and saying, oh my God, this was the best movie that I've seen all year, you've got to go check it out. But like I said at the beginning of this, I don't see a lot of people online talking about it now. So I don't know. I'd be very curious to see where it lands as a movie.
Yeah. That
All right,
definitely
well,
speaks to this is just content for the mass, not even for the mass, but just for content to fill in the void until Hawkeye releases this fall.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't I'm starting to get that sense in general, not to mention the fact that like when you start introducing the multiverse stuff, I think that multiverse, like while it's cool in theory, it introduces a bunch of problems into the MCU that plague the comics already, which is storylines get really, really confusing, and you have to, you kind of have to know everything to know what thing was in what piece of whatever. Even with the end of Loki, where Loki does not end in the same universe that he started in, it's a huge mess already. But more importantly, it absolves the universe from consequences, because you can always jump over to another universe and Tony Stark is still alive and Loki is still alive and Black Widow is still alive. And, in this universe, Captain America never went back in time and gave up his shield. And in this universe, like there's 3 Captain Americas and it doesn't matter anymore at that point. So like they're kind of playing with fire with all this kind of stuff, because it's going to get really hard for them to maintain a narrative that actually has stakes and is actually emotionally fulfilling for viewers. And judging by the Disney Plus shows, they're walking that line already, if not already on the other side of it. So I don't know. Jen, final thoughts on Black Widow before we take it away.
This was too little too late. This was not the movie that Black Widow deserved, and it was 5 years after it should have been released in the first place. I maintain that there should have been 2, at least, movies for her. The story of her, her childhood in the Red Room, culminating with her escape, and then, coming back to finish the job here with her quote unquote family. But we didn't get it, and this really, really missed.
Yeah. I don't think I need a second movie necessarily, but if this one had been a really great spy movie, it would have, and something that really endeared me a little bit more to Natasha Romanoff. I think it could have added something kind of strange to the MCU because of the chronology, but I think it still could have added a lot. But I agree, it was too little too late, and it was not what I think it needed to be to give a send-off to this character in the way that she probably deserved. Paul?
I think this is probably the biggest missed opportunity for Marvel in their MCU so far. You could have easily seen a Black Widow trilogy. I mean, Mission Impossible is at what, 8? I mean, if you basically make this into Mission Impossible, you keep printing money. And Scarlett Johansson's one of those actors that could carry a franchise like that. And you can see it. It doesn't take that hard to look at something where you have an interesting background, you have a great character and a great actor all coming into one, and it should have been something that it wasn't. And this just, I don't think anybody was really asking for this movie, and it's just kind of disappointing, because Marvel has not been known to miss opportunities like this. They usually create their own opportunities in the MCU, and it's just disappointing.
Dude, I can absolutely imagine a Mission Impossible type movie, but where, instead of Tom Cruise, it's Scarlett Johansson, which, I can't say that's not an upgrade in a lot of ways. And then also she has to fight crazy, super powered thing. Like, you can add in so many cool things that make for legitimate challenges that somebody with no superpowers has to overcome with her intelligence and guile and skill and agility and all of the things that make Black Widow an interesting character that can compete on the level of a Thor or a Hulk, you know, or an Iron Man. So yeah, it's a shame. But that is all we have time for today for the main body of the episode. But if you are a supporter of the show on Patreon or Subscribestar, as per usual, we are going to stick around. We're going to answer some viewer questions after this. So please, for everybody else, do check us out on Patreon, subscribestar.com/outoframeshow. Check out our Discord server, which is growing continually, basically, and like it's gotten so big that like I find it hard to keep up with the conversations in there actually at this point. So you know, join there, and if you join and become a supporter of the show, you can get into the private backstage part of things where I can keep track of things a little bit better, and we can participate in more conversation. But other than that, yeah, check us out on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and of course join our Instagram. And then, did I say Instagram? Maybe I did. But also check out our weekly email newsletter at fee.org/OOF-newsletter. It's I'm actually really excited about it. We are putting out new emails every week on Wednesday. Not only a good way to keep track of like what new content we've got coming out for Out of Frame and for behind the scenes, but also we give our own recommendations. We do you know, like a unique article every week. It's pretty cool. So I think you guys should all check it out. For everybody who is already a subscriber, stick around and we'll get to your viewer questions in just a minute. But with that said, thanks for watching.